So we're back with the update cars for this week, and we've got a car with a name so heroic that my normal voice just won't do. So this
is the Ocelot Penetrator.
Now this is based on the Jaguar XJ220, which is a car I think is mostly responsible for the booming hypercars that still exist today. So at the point that this was released, in my view, there had only really ever been two hypercars, and they were the Ferrari F40 and the Porsche 959. Now you can make your arguments about the Miura and about the SL300, but honestly, when we're talking proper hypercars, I think the F40 and the 959 were the only two we'd had, and no one was really doing anything until Jaguar, of all people, who at that time had only ever really made luxury cars and kind of sports coupes, they came out with this, the XJ220, so named because it could do 220 miles an hour. Except it couldn't do 220 miles an hour, it could do 212. Unless you took the catalytic converter off and the rev limiter off, in which case it could do 217. But I think you'll admit that's a much less catchy name and would lead to a much larger boot badge. And that was the first of the downfalls to this car, because this really was the car that almost was. So one of the other downfalls was the price. This thing was £470,000 in the early 90s. That's the equivalent of over £1 million today. So it was not a cheap car. This was designed and presented to people in the late 80s when yuppies were everywhere and greed was good. So there was no shortage of people to put up the £50,000 deposit that you needed to secure one of these things. And I believe 1,500 people put up that deposit. So why then did they only sell 282? And why did the last one of these sell for just over £120,000? Well, that's where we come to the other reasons for its downfall. So if you placed your deposit in the late 80s for this thing, you would have expected to receive your V12 hypercar in the early 90s. But by the time it got built, it had kind of lost 6 cylinders, and it had become a V6. And not just that, it had the V6 from a Metro. Now, it wasn't just any Metro, it was the Rallybred 6R4, but trying to explain that your hypercar has a Metro engine in it is a bit like trying to explain to your new girlfriend that you've got one of the really fun STDs. Then, another nail in the coffin was this car released in 1992. Right at the height of the recession of the early 90s. So all of those yuppies who placed those orders, they just couldn't afford this thing anymore. So even if you were okay with the fact that you were getting a V6 instead of a V12 and you still had the money to buy this, that number of people that could afford this was just shrinking and shrinking. And then the final nail in the coffin, I think, was this. The McLaren F1. This launched not long after the XJ220 and was better in almost every way. It was faster, it was better looking, yes, it was more expensive, but it was worth it. This was the very height of technology at the time and was absolute driving perfection, and it was something that the XJ220 just couldn't compete with, and as a result, this was always the car that never was. And that's what I thought it was going to be in the game. And I was really happy to be disappointed, because in the game,
the Ocelot Penetrator,
this is actually a really decent car. I was very, very pleasantly surprised. So let's talk about how you get this. So it's not one that you need to buy.
the Ocelot Penetrator.
It is the LS Car Meet prize ride, and it's another one of the attendance challenges. So what you need to do to get this is finish top 5 for 3 days in a row. And that was made even easier for me, because seriously dude, how did you even do that? I've never seen anyone get a car so badly messed up in the drag race before. But anyway, I digress. Now, if you follow my guide, I know I always say this, but if you follow my guide, the drag races have a maximum of 4 people. So if you do a drag race 3 days in a row, you are basically guaranteed to get
the Ocelot Penetrator.
So let's have a look at what top speed we can achieve with this. So if you're new to the channel, this is a short section of track. I've measured it, it's exactly 1 mile. I drive this bit as cleanly as possible, then do a little bit of maths at the end, and that gives you an achievable speed through traffic. And this is what this one managed to do. So what do we think of
the Ocelot Penetrator?
Well, I was surprisingly impressed with it. I expected to dislike it because I don't think it's a particularly good model. Yes, the proportions are right, yes, it looks like the XJ220, but it's all a little bit too smooth. It almost looks like your first test project. You know, if someone's trying to learn to use Blender and they want to try and design their own supercar, it looks like this will be your first attempt at doing that. It's just too smooth. Now, I know in real life the car was very smooth, but this just feels, if I'm honest, it feels a little bit low effort. So speed wise I expected it to be terrible, but it seems to hold its own. It turns in a relatively decent time at the end, which is pretty good considering it wasn't a particularly clean start to the lap. The handling is also not too bad. Like most of the other Ocelots, it's a little bit dull at the turn-in, but it is quite good fun. It responds quite well to being thrown about. And in free mode, even in free mode, it's a decent car. It can even hold its own against a Night Shark if the driver of the Night Shark is crap enough. Customization wise, it is a little bit weak. You've only got a couple of options, although, so far as I know, this is the only car that gives you the option to make the exhaust look like Jen's feet. So, all things considered, what do we think? Well, considering what you need to do to get this, which is basically nothing, I think this is really worthwhile. If you look at where it sits on the lapboard at the end, it really is mixing it with some very new and very expensive cars. So you can do this. Anyone that's got the game can do this. Join a drag race. 3 days on the trot, you've still got time to do it. You're absolutely guaranteed to get this thing. Because as I say, the drag races can only have 4 people in, and you only need to finish top 5. So do that 3 days running, you will get this. It looks pretty cool, even though I wish they'd put a little bit more effort into the model. I still think it is a cool looking car, and it's a car with a cool history. And also, I don't think I have ever seen a single other person driving this thing in a session in GTA Online. And that's understandable because it's kind of overlooked. It's overlooked in the game for the same reason that it was overlooked in real life. There are just so many other things that were released at a similar time to this that were just so much better. But that doesn't mean you should avoid this. I think it's got a lot of charm, I think it's got a lot of character, and I think it's a really worthwhile addition to anyone's garage in this game. With so many cars being so similar, I think this is one that really stands out. So here's the time it managed to do. Which, as you can see, 8:56, that's not bad. And here's where it sits on the lapboard. And as you can see as this scrolls through, this is right next to the Omelette, which is a brand new and very well respected car. So if you can get something as quick as that, for virtually no effort, I can't think of a single reason why you shouldn't do it. Just don't paint it silver, because everyone that bought one new painted it silver. Just don't do that. Do something different. And that's it for this video. Hope you found that useful. and I will see you all in the next one.